maybe talking about ourselves, maybe? No? Yeah? Okay, well, hi everyone. You want to start?
Sure. My job is to make money from money without being a total jerk. And the wealth that I generate goes back into the state through the pension plan. Through Meyer, we grant and invest capital throughout the state. So generally, I think of myself as Robin Hood, and you are the people that I'm looking for, and this community that you're a part of is what we hope to fund and create, so it's really, really exciting to see you here. So exciting.
It's impressive. My name is Shea Betin. I'm the director, and director of programs at the Portland Mercado, and I work with the team over there that mostly does small business technical assistance and support. I imagine most of you know the Portland Mercado as just the food carts on 72nd and Foster, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we always talk about the Mercado, and everyone goes, I love the Portland Mercado, and it's like, yes, but do you know what's upstairs at the Portland Mercado? So for those of you who don't know, upstairs it's a team, it's a small but mighty team of 7 people, and they work to support small businesses. We also have one of Portland's only bilingual, affordable sliding scale commissary kitchens on site with more than 70 tenants. And then there's obviously the affordable retail opportunities on site, as well as activation through art, entertainment, music, cultural programming. So that's it in a nutshell. And we have a lot of amazing partners that we work with in this room, including Built Oregon. Yeah.
Shea and I talked and decided we were going to have an open conversation, like a family conversation. I'm going to try to not edit what I would say based on who you are, who I am, or the situation. So I probably will offend you. So get ready for it. How about that? We're just going to say what we really think and not filter here.
Yeah, I'm going to do my best, because I was telling Aldo on our team earlier that when I'm nervous, I slip into Grant talk, and that's code for like white talk, and so he's going to look at me and like do an air horn whenever I like get nervous and start talking like that. So, gracias de nuevo.
De nada.
Yeah. So where do we start?
Where do we start?
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Kind of where the landscape is now,
yeah.
Or where it's been, where it's going.
Yeah, some things. Maybe we'll riff, and I'll talk about some things that are troubling me about where it's going and what I see in our work.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll start, I guess, with something that's been on my mind recently. Just like the multiple narratives around entrepreneurship in this city. That's something that weighs on our team pretty heavily. Is that better? Okay. So we on the team and a lot of our partners from other culturally specific nonprofits. For those of you who don't know, the Mercado's owned and operated by Hacienda CDC. It's a Latino service organization, does affordable housing, all sorts of stuff. And we work with other service organizations like NEA, PANO, a huge number of other nonprofits in town. And we work with a lot of entrepreneurs. Like, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs. Most of them are doing entrepreneurship as a way to just to pay the bills, because access to employment is rough, especially if you're undocumented, you have issues finding jobs through any number of barriers. Oftentimes you have an awesome family recipe and you know how to run a business because you've done it in your home country, and you get to the US and you say, I'm going to do that. And that's most of the folks that we're working with. And so that's, I think, a more common narrative about entrepreneurship in the city of Portland than what we always hear when we talk about entrepreneurship. I think it's like more than half of the people in Portland work for a small business that's at that scale. That's more than half of all the jobs in the city. And so whenever I'm in these circles, and it's always a privilege to get invited, I'm like, well, let's talk about this. This is the bulk of entrepreneurship in the city. It's subsistence, it's survival, and it's also grit, and it's also hard work. So anyway, that's been on my mind a lot because of all these other things that are in my head.
Right, and that's fascinating to me because I'm one of the capital sources. Generally, I try to stay behind the curtain like Oz and not step out in front. But what I'm discovering is that as we talk about women in the workplace and some behavior that sometimes goes sideways and is protected, and we see through reporting that capital isn't getting to the kinds of businesses that you talk to, then people in my role have to yank the chain. We have to say, is our capital being used to drive outcomes that we support, or is it being used to cause or double down on some of the externalities that we don't like? And so this last year and a half, I would say, I've had to step into the I'd say, a more visible role than I feel comfortable with, and start to assert some values with how our capital is used, and sometimes having to, for lack of a better word, punch some of my friends in the face, because we send money out into, especially into Oregon, expecting it to be equitably distributed, but what we see in who gets loans and which businesses grow and where the capital flows, women and people of color do not get that, don't have access to capital, and that doesn't really work when I'm the distributor of the capital, right? That doesn't work. So when ladies at church are tapping me on the shoulder telling me that I need to be more visible and vocal about the use of our capital, it slowly pushed me into a more visible role, because I want folks who are in your accelerator, who are trying to start businesses, to have as much access to capital as anyone else. And if people like me don't speak up, things won't change. And it's been a real challenge. Look, in my seat, I'm invited to the privileged cookout. And the expectation being there is that I don't speak up. And in speaking up, there was this moment of acknowledging that my invitation to the cookout might get yanked. But what I also have learned in this year of speaking up and being more visible in support of entrepreneurs is that there's really no cookout without us, right? So, like, there might be a barbecue, maybe there's some Jell-O salad, but there's no real cookout. So I just have lost my fear of being disinvited to privileged spaces, because those spaces just don't exist. They're not supported. There isn't the labor there for them. There isn't the creativity there for them. There isn't the flavor there for them. It's just not there. So I've lost that fear. But it's been, I would say, I am unusual for people in my seat feeling comfortable stepping out into the scene. But meeting people like you, I'm like, yo, I gotta use my ovaries, because this is just not gonna work. I just can't sit around and, be at cookouts and not say anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and then I think a lot of people in my position feel that way exactly, like, oh, I just don't want to be the angry brown guy in the room bringing up all the things that no one wants to hear about, and that's what it feels a lot of the time. And I was just thinking back, shout out to Stephen Green, who was sharing this earlier in the month. Oh, shout out to Stephen Green earlier, who was sharing this earlier in the month. 96%. That's the drop in loans from SBA to black businesses in the last 10 years. 96% drop. That's crazy.
Go tell it.
That's crazy.
Even crazier when I'm the capital source. What the holy crap is happening there, right? So Stephen, my wig was on the floor. He snatched it off and was like, what the hell are you doing? So the writing in PBJ, why are you laughing? I know you did it. It was nice, but you did it. And so that precipitous drop, not just in SBA loans, but it led me to ask some of our CDFI partners and some of our distribution partners for demographic information on an itemized basis, who's receiving the capital. And then I moved beyond that to ask, okay, how much are you charging them? And there are a number of trends that are troubling, and that led me, his advocacy, and then meeting entrepreneurs like the people you work with have led me to put some terms on how we move money from our endowment out into the community in order to drive commonwealth.
Yeah, and I think it's
what
great.
would you want me to ask?
Well, yeah, no, good. Because I think it's about how that wealth gets delivered, and there's different mechanisms, and there's some that we respond to better and that are specifically designed from the community. Like, wealth has been a part of the community, and wealth building has been a part of the community since, before colonialism. Like, at Hacienda, some of the most effective tools that we use, just because we got to hustle just like the entrepreneurs, and miso is fantastic and we use miso a ton, but sometimes that's not going to be enough to get someone started. So Aldo, one of our advisors, he's over here, shout out to Aldo, he'll just pull out and work on a Kiva application page, and we'll use the Mercado's platform to push it out because we have the privilege of having this awesome following, or we'll use the IDA program for the state, or another one that we use is tandas, lending circles, and that's one that our community has done for hundreds and hundreds of years. And very luckily at Hacienda, we're able to build a product that's a lending circle that reports to the credit bureaus. And so it's kind of like listening to the needs of the community, meeting folks where they're at, and designing products that really fit what people are already doing and what they're used to. And there's financial knowledge, and there's this incredible wealth of knowledge and startups and flavors and all this stuff that's happening. But yeah. Yeah,
no, I hear that in what you've said, that there are clear things that the sources of financial capital can do to drive more equitable access, which we will definitely do. The thing that sort of grates at me is that financial capital is only one form of capital that entrepreneurs really need to drive success in their businesses. Now, it may be one of the early catalytic sources of capital, but it's not the only source, right? Mm-hmm. And we know that the community connections that Mitch and the Built team are trying to create here, that's a form of social capital that you will bring to bear for your businesses. Some of you, depending on what the type of business is, might need natural capital in the vast, wild, open spaces and healthy plants and food that we grow as a part of the product that you create. But what has been fascinating to me in my seat is that we are willing to socialize natural capital, right, in our park system and in our water systems. But when it comes to financial capital, we don't want to socialize it. We don't want to democratize it. In fact, the people who have it want to hoard it and keep it. And so really trying to push investors away from trying to extract wealth for excess wealth for their own gain, instead pushing financial capital out to drive commonwealth, which is what you guys are doing in this room, is it's a big challenge for a number of reasons. But the advantage of being in a small place like Oregon is that if I were someone trying to just hoard as much wealth as I could for our institution or for individual people, this is a small place. I'm going to bump into you. Mm-hmm. And Stephen's going to be grabbing my wig, and somebody's going to be tapping me on the shoulder. So there's no faking here. Mm-hmm. Like either you're about it or you're not. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that we cannot be about it, right? That's just the reality of being brown and being in this place is you can't fake it forever. Maybe for a little while, but not forever. Right. Yeah.
No, that's good. And it's something you just said earlier, it's like bouncing around my head, but when you're talking about social capital, it goes down to relationships. And relationships are how white supremacy propagates itself and recreates itself constantly. It's just based on who we know and who we're talking to.
And who we pit against one another, right? That's the other way of hoarding social capital, is preventing the kinds of connections and relationships that will allow a community or communities to thrive. Mm-hmm.
No, and I think one thing I hear from entrepreneurs, it's Black, Brown, Asian, all the entrepreneurs in our communities, is that there is a really resilient community that folks rely on each other. And that's outside of all the nonprofits, like our work, any of our work, like all of these accelerators and nonprofits and all the people doing this work. Outside of all of that, it's really strong. Folks are united, and there's more willingness to share and collaborate and lead and also coach in this community that I've seen than I haven't seen anywhere else in the United States. And I think that's what's special about Portland to me.
So special. Yeah. And I think that also is what will transform our economy. That willingness to help each other and grow and develop some kind of commonwealth, I think that will be the transformation. Look, having entrepreneurs at Mercado is important because it seems like each company and all of you are working on one individual business and maybe a community of businesses, but you're not. In saying that you want commonwealth to be a part of how we build individual and community wealth, what you're saying is we're trying to change how capitalism expresses itself in the place that we live together. And that's a huge, huge, audacious goal. And it starts in small kitchens, people making salsa or people making clothes or people making mushroom jerky or whatever it is, and those companies growing like Ben & Jerry and expressing values and having B Corp values be the standard bearer for the financial community here, and then business associations like Business for a Better Portland rising up and starting to influence policy. That ambition in transforming our economy is amazing. And there aren't that many places in the country that can actually do it. Right? It can start in a food cart pod. And for people like me in the capital seat, the key is to get out of the way, right? To get out of the way of these folks who are trying to change the way that our businesses interact with society. And although our democracy is the way that we organize our government, capitalism drives a lot more of how we interact with one another. And if our objective is to transform the way that businesses run, then I think we'll transform society. right? So like I'm down for that tia who's making some yummy shit in your kitchen. Like she's about to change our whole capitalist structure. She's not just making something yummy.
I mean, I hear that, but I also just, I don't want to be negative. We live the barriers every day. Like a lot of our work ends up being barrier navigation. Like we just, help folks navigate, whether it's language or cultural, that permit, that registration with the state. How do you do a sales sheet? How do you talk to folks? And I know small businesses already have those challenges as it is, but then you layer on like intersectionality and all the extra challenges that folks face. But I agree with you, like it's immense, and it's an opportunity to change the way that capitalism is functioning. And we have these early stages of collaboration between all these groups who are aligned. Like, for those of you who don't know about the Bridges program, that's been an amazing 2 years for us, working with Mitch and Rick and Pitch Black and Naya and Apano and all these other groups, because we get to meet retailers directly who have been hungry and keep saying like, hey, we want more entrepreneurs of color on our shelves. How do we meet them? It's like, well, we've always just kind of yelled and said, well, just go out and meet them. We're here. Like, just come out, show up. And then we said, okay, well, let's actually like build a place for folks to show up. And that's cool. I mean, it's led to some great outcomes. And it's really cool to see folks here today just sharing amazing products and interfacing with everybody. And that's awesome. That's good. That's part of the change. But it takes showing up.
It does, but I think those barriers are strengthening. So I understand that it is more difficult, particularly for people of color who are entrepreneurs, but I'm reminded about, whenever I'm challenged, I think about my great-grandmother, and then her great-grandmother, and her great-grandmother. And things are hard, but they're no more difficult than they've ever been, right? In fact, we're probably richer, more well-trained, and more prepared to compete than, people in our families have ever been. So to the extent that there's an advantage, I think advantage is in our favor. I also think that when we have businesses that feed people, now I'm gonna just go meta on you guys, like super meta. Our investment portfolio, it embraces the world, right? Some of the investments are made here in Portland, but I see the whole world. And to the extent that the United States has been hegemonic, or, we've dominated the world stage, we sometimes think that's because of our military might or because of our size. More than anything, it's because we fed the world after World War I and World War II, that we had all these innovations in food science and food production, and the innovation in consumer products, particularly around food, is why we dominate the world. It's not our guns, right? It's not our military. It's no damn jet plane. So as I look out on particularly the consumption goods and thinking about how we get humans protein that isn't animal-based, what you are all doing is helping the United States continue to generate influence in the world. And whether that influence appears to be militaristic or it converts into something that's a little bit more benevolent, time will tell. But food science innovation in particular, to me, is the center of American power. So I want you to cook some shit up in your kitchen. I want you to experiment with whatever you think will drive innovation, because the world needs to be fed. We need innovation in particular around how we feed human beings. So it is hard, but we've always done the hard work, right? Whether it was building the country or laying railroad tracks or, taking care of our food systems. That labor, I think, has led subsequent generations to the kind of clarity and power that if we can staple capital on top of it, we got this.
Yeah, we've done it. Let's just build an asset that's ours.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right, instead of having our bodies or our labor being owned, we own our bodies, our labor, and the output of that creativity. That's the shift that our generation is making, is from being objects of wealth to being, to being subjects controlling wealth.
I wish that's what people said when they talked about the creative class. That's like, it's the real creative class. Like, anyway.
I also hope, that as we figure out how to be more thoughtful to move capital out, that the people who can make it anywhere make it right here. Like, I don't know about brands. I don't know nothing about nothing other than making money from money, but what I really hope is that we begin to attract the kind of innovative talent that can be anywhere, right? That we take our natural environment, we take our smart capital, we take our social capital, we wrap it around natural capital, and something amazing happens here.
I think it is here already. I think communities are here. I think people are here. Like, we're out here. Literally, we out here. But yeah,
So what's keeping you up at night, though?
Paying my staff. You know, we're a nonprofit. Nonprofits have structural deficiencies in how they operate and how they get the work done. And I think it's the chosen avenue by which all of social work's kind of being put into. You know, like, we have a decline in kind of the state and how the state manages a lot of this work. And it's a great opportunity because culturally specific organizations can serve the community more authentically and from the same folks who've come up and in a way that will actually be effective and drive outcomes, but you're still limited to that structural challenge. Like, all the nonprofits doing entrepreneurship work in Portland are still nonprofits, and they still have that model where they gotta go after donations and grants, and the grants shift priorities, and honestly, that's a huge challenge. And we still do the work, we still have our driving core values and our mission, and we serve Latinx entrepreneurs, we serve folks in our kitchen, we're getting folks on shelves, and we're helping folks grow assets. And that's important, that's our North Star, that's what keeps us going. And then I think I have an awesome team that I can lean on. Like, all of them are here, and I love them. And those of you that saw Tostado in the back, the coffee, Adriana is actually one of the advisors on our team. Chris Bailey's an advisor on our team. There's Aldo Medina. Like, we have a great team. And I think, you know, as a director, sometimes you stay up being like, all right, where's my next big grant gonna come from? Like, we got a good few years on us right now.
Wow, you're opening the philanthropy door. So I'm not on the grant making side of the house again. My job is to club baby seals and steal money from old ladies in order to get it out in the community. But in some ways, I think philanthropy is a hustle, and it makes me really uncomfortable to be close to it, to have people like you to sort of have to ask, and there's this weird, you know, dance that we do. I don't like that so much of the innovation here is dependent on philanthropic dollars. Philanthropies want to exist. They don't really want to transform the world. It's really hard. We talk about it, but like really actually doing it is hard. And I just don't like that. It feels to me like folks who run nonprofits are always living hand to mouth, even though they're doing the spirit work that's critical to our economy. And I don't like our model. And I'm a part of it, and I don't like it. So can you help me fix that? I don't know what what to do about it.
We can try.
Okay,
yeah.
We can try.
Yeah, I think apart from that, I just thinking about folks taking risks, people who are investing a lot of time and effort and money. We've got a few folks at the Mercado that have a food cart, and out of that food cart, their gross sales are at 500,000, and now they're growing and making a restaurant. And those are huge leaps from folks who might be monolingual Spanish speakers with you know, immigration issues, right? And then that's a huge risk to take.
So this immigration issue is one where we can work together. So I know that when we provide capital to our intermediaries, there are some strings attached in the underwriting process, and sometimes that includes social security numbers, and that's an example of one where we can say ITIN numbers are fine, and we don't need certain kinds of traditional underwriting in order to make loans to the ultimate destination, to the entrepreneur. So that's an area where we can definitely work together to make some change. In the end, I hope that we can get our capital structure outside of the federal program. So that's another area where I'm really struggling right now, is that for non-US citizens who apply for loans, there's some risk that the information that they provide to the national government might boomerang. And so what that is making clear to me is the state of Oregon doesn't have a state bank, for example. So we don't have another mechanism other than federally guaranteed programs and loans to match our contributions. And that's another area where I see now we can exert some influence and start to think about how can we have capital sources that are within the state and don't rely on federal programs to provide funding. That's a 20-year project, and that's an area where I can see we can be really helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I mean, ITIN products are on the rise nationwide, and Hacienda's in the process of doing one for the home ownership side, like an ITIN home ownership loan, and that's a huge goal of ours because we have such a housing portfolio as well,
right,
where folks are living in our housing properties, and we want folks to transition to home ownership. So I mean, yeah, it feels like a lower barrier to fix, but it's just not.
A little complicated. Well, and more than anything, those programs that isolate or exclude people are really trying to get us to retreat from the influence and retreat from the public stage. The other thing you and I talked a little bit about earlier was us getting comfortable taking up more space. And not just taking up space personally, but to have our businesses be visible, to know that there's a second floor at the Mercado where there's interesting stuff going on, and to really not back down from, leadership. And again, that's another thing that pushes people like me out of, hiding. And the reality for most folks is when they think of the capital source, they imagine that it's like Mitt Romney in the back or like some dude like that investing in their local communities. And it's not Mitt Romney, it's me. And maybe even just being more visible and taking up more space sets a tone of expectation for people to treat your entrepreneurs in a different way. So that challenge of entrepreneurs and capital and folks in the community just get big and set expectations about how we'll behave is something that is a challenge for me. I'm uncomfortable with that. Like, as a nice middle-aged lady, I just want to sometimes just be nice and be in my garden drinking Chardonnay, like.
Same though.
Yeah, right. And it's hard to overcome the desire to just be polite and liked, but in the end, I'm learning that I have to throw some elbows. The responsibility of shepherding this pool of capital means that it's not shits and giggles sometimes. Sometimes it means you're accountable to me and there will be consequences. And that has taken me time to get comfortable. And if we start to be more visible, then some of the entrepreneurs, especially folks who are relying on ITINs for capital, will be more comfortable coming out of the economic shadow, so to speak. And we really, 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 really need to take up more space in our capitalist and financial system, not just in our creative and brand and marketing and consumption system, but in the parts of our lives that control sources of capital. We've got to be big and visible.
Yeah, just send us an invite. We'll show up. We'll be there. No, for real. I appreciate that tremendously. That's. I'm trying to think of others.
Any questions from you guys? Well, we have probably time for one question.
You talked about philanthropy being broken in some ways. I'm curious if things like the Gates Foundation or other people who are trying to evolve philanthropy are doing it in ways that you want to mirror.
Yeah, so I will confess again, I'm not on the giving away side, I'm on the earning side. And there are things about what we do that are wonderful, like this building. Our investments in the community help to jumpstart the process for renovating this building. So it's not all bad. My boss will wring my neck if this gets back to her. But I have not seen any form of philanthropy that is actually catalytic. I think the way that we could make philanthropy catalytic would be philanthropy is just a tax-advantaged pool of money, right? Fundamentally, that's what foundations are. One way that we could make them more catalytic is to have the original earnings just pay taxes to support the programs that need supporting anyway. But if that's not going to happen, then I would say having foundation money that is only investment, not charity, wherein the funds are invested so that entrepreneurs and founders or program, executives keep all of the upside of their capital. And the foundation capital has no intention of extracting any excess wealth out of that, right? We need to cover inflation and a few other things. But that the vast majority of the wealth would stay with the entrepreneurs and creators. I think if we did that and we distributed capital more equitably, we could be transformational. But that's really, really, really hard to do.
I'll just say from the Hacienda side, what drew me to Hacienda CDC as a nonprofit was it's not your traditional 501c3, it's an asset building organization. And the goal of Hacienda is to take the money it makes through development of properties and through other revenue building activities to reinvest in the community. So yeah, I agree there's problems to the model, but there are some ways that you can kind of circumvent it. And we've tried to build in sustainability to our programs. Our commissary kitchen is self-sustaining. The income we get from that kitchen on a sliding scale supports the staff that we have that run it. Some of our other staff obviously has more traditional nonprofit like grant models that we use to pay for our time, but Hacienda as a whole is built towards that self-sustaining work, which is why I feel that I'm there and a lot of the team is there.
I think we've been told we're out of time. Thank you for listening to us.